Hello there, and welcome to Origins of Earth, where curiosity gets cozy and the past unfolds slowly enough to fall asleep to.
Tonight, I'd like to take you somewhere far back in time.
The story we're stepping into isn't about the towering dinosaurs, but about what happened next when the small and the overlooked began to rise.
Because after all, the roaring stopped, the scurrying began, and in that silence, something new started breathing life into the world. So, wherever you're listening from tonight, perhaps curled up under a blanket, or watching the glow of a late lamp, take a moment to imagine the Earth not as it is now, but as it was 66 million years ago, when mammals inherited the night.
And if you find this gentle wonder soothing, I'd be ever so grateful if you gave the video a like and maybe subscribed.
It helps this calm little corner of science find others who need a soft story before sleep. Now, settle in and let's begin.
Because the world we know was once a very different place. And it all started when the night was the only safe time left to live.
Before mammals truly took over, they were small, cautious creatures living in the long shadow of the dinosaurs.
For over 150 million years, they survived beneath the feet of giants. They were quick and quiet, mostly nocturnal. Their lives spent in burrows, under leaves, or among roots. They didn't roar or rule. They waited.
And then one day, or rather one night, everything changed. About 66 million years ago,
it struck near what's now the Yucatan Peninsula. The impact released energy billions of times greater than any modern bomb.
And within seconds, everything within hundreds of kilometers was incinerated. Shock waves flattened forests, the sky filled with molten rock. The heat alone would have been unbearable, but the aftermath was worse. Dust, ash, and soot rose high into the atmosphere, blocking sunlight around the world. Photosynthesis faltered.
temperatures dropped. Days dimmed into a long twilight. In a sense, Earth's light was turned off.
Without sunlight, plants withered. Without plants, herbivorous dinosaurs starved.
What remained were the small, the buried, the hidden, the ones that could eat anything and live anywhere. Imagine a landscape stripped bare, the smell of char and dust hanging in the air. Trees stand as blackened skeletons. Somewhere beneath the ground, in the safety of tunnels, a small, short-tailed weasel stirs. It's been here all along.
But now, for the first time, the night belongs to them.
These early mammals were nothing like the lions or elephants we know today. Most were no larger than mice or shrews.
Some were insect eaters, others scavengers, and a few omnivores that could adapt to whatever they found.
In a world stripped of certainty, adaptability became the new form of strength.
What allowed them to survive? Part of the answer lies in their biology. Unlike reptiles,
This ability, endothermia, meant they could stay active even when the environment cooled.
They also reproduced differently. Mammalian mothers produced milk, allowing their young to grow in a more controlled way.
Their young were nurtured, protected, hidden. When danger was everywhere, that parental care made all the difference. For tens of thousands of years after the impact, life struggled. Entire ecosystems had to rebuild from the ground up.
But mammals, with their small size, flexible diets, and rapid reproduction, were ready to fill every gap left behind.
Some climbed trees, others returned to the open ground, and a few even took to the water. Step by step, night after night, the balance of life shifted. The age that followed was ruled by resilience.
The mammals that survived weren't just the ancestors of one type of animal. They were the seeds of many.
Among them were the early placentals, whose descendants would one day include primates, rodents, bats, and even whales.
There were marsupial relatives as well, clinging to survival in southern continents. And then there were the monotremes, egg-laying mammals,
strange holdovers from an older world, still quietly thriving.
Each of these lineages carried something essential, a kind of evolutionary toolkit for a planet starting over.
Picture the forests returning. It took millions of years, but once it did, the stage was set.
Flowering plants spread widely, giving rise to fruits and seeds that enticed hungry mammals. Insects flourished again.
The earth warmed, climate stabilized, and the survivors began to explore beyond their burrows.
As night turned to day again, mammals adapted to both. Those that once crept in darkness began to explore the sunlit world.
Their eyes adjusted, their behavior changed, and new species emerged, each a tiny experiment in survival.
In many ways, mammals thrived not because they were superior, but because they were flexible. Dinosaurs had ruled.
They could shift diets, adapt to cold, hide from predators, or find new sources of food. That pattern became their defining trait.
By the time 10 million years had passed since the asteroid, the planet was unrecognizable. New phases. In North America and Eurasia, mammals grew larger, their bodies experimenting with new forms.
Carnivores evolved sharper senses and coordinated hunting behaviors, adapting to the new kinds of prey.
What began as tiny shrew-like creatures diversified into hundreds of forms, each exploring a new ecological path.
In the ancient wetlands of what's now Wyoming, strange hoofed animals roamed, while in tropical forests, early primates leaped through branches. In South America, marsupial predators filled roles similar to cats and wolves.
On the southern, each landmass became its own experiment in mammalian evolution, shaped by isolation, climate, and chance.
But before the rise of those recognizable forms, there was still a long period when the night truly did belong to mammals. During the first several million years after the extinction, the sky was quieter. The oceans were strange and recovering.
Their senses, especially hearing and smell, were their greatest tools. Many could detect predators long before they were seen.
Others communicated through chirps, scents, or vibrations. These traits, shaped in the dark, would remain in their descendants. The fossil record from this period tells a story written in fragments, tiny jaws, teeth, and bones found in ancient sediments.
Each fossil reveals the slow but steady rise of complexity. We find evidence of mammals diversifying into new dietary niches. It's as if evolution, suddenly given a blank canvas, begat sketching ideas at an accelerated pace.
Among these early experiments was a group called the multituberculates, rodent-like mammals that dominated for tens of millions of years.
Eventually, true rodents and primates would outcompete them, but for a long time, they were the quiet rulers of the mammalian world.
Their persistence illustrates how much of early mammal evolution was about endurance rather than dominance.
Imagine standing in a nighttime forest 50 million years ago. The air is warm and thick with the smell of vegetation.
There are no familiar animals, no birds you'd recognize, no human sound. Instead, there are
In the canopy, the small, bright eyes of tarsiers gleam as they leap between branches.
Even the sky held different stars. The continents were not where they are today. South America and Africa had already drifted apart. The oceans swirled differently, and global temperatures were higher than now. In this warm world, mammals expanded with the climate. Over time, this quiet revolution in biology began to shape everything. Mammals didn't just survive, they transformed ecosystems. By consuming insects and plants and spreading seeds, they helped forests regenerate. By digging burrows, they aerated soil. It's easy to think of this time as distant, but in a way, it's the origin of the world we still live in.
The balance between predator and prey, the rhythm of day and night, the interconnected webs of forests and fields, all were re-established.
The planet itself continued to shift. Volcanic activity released greenhouse gases, warming the atmosphere and encouraging vegetation growth.
With more plants came more food, and with more food came larger mammals.
This was the quiet beginning.
The world they shaped was not peaceful, but it was balanced. Predators hunted prey, plants reclaimed land. In that stability, diversity flourished. Every ecosystem, from the damp forest floor to the mammals, took them all, not in a rush, but gradually, generation after generation, each one testing a new adaptation.
And so, from the ashes of catastrophe, the mammal story began, not with dominance, but with endurance.
The night that once hid them became the canvas for their survival. The darkness became the stage where evolution rehearsed for the daylight.
The world that followed the fire was fragile, quiet, and strange. The marks of destruction were everywhere.
East Asian female scientists have found a thin layer of iridium-rich clay that marks the boundary between the age of dinosaurs and the age of mammals.
That thin layer is a geological scar, representing the end of millions of years of life's dominance by one lineage. In the months after the collision, temperatures plummeted.
The seas cooled and acidified. Coral reefs died. Plankton populations crashed. And
Yet life, as it always does, found a way to persist. Deep sea vents, underground mammals were among those who waited out the disaster underground, feeding on roots, insects, and anything they could find. These small beings didn't know it, but the world above was reshaping itself for them.
When the sunlight finally returned, it did not restore the old world. The atmosphere had changed. The forests were gone.
But the small mammals emerged to find opportunity. The Earth's surface, once dangerous and crowded, was now open. The land was quiet, and the silence was full of potential.
In those early years, life began with simplicity. Ferns were among the first plants to reclaim the land, sprouting in dense mats.
Back then, they covered entire regions, transforming the blackened landscapes into green again.
These pioneers laid the foundation for the new ecosystems that mammals would inherit.
The mammals that stepped cautiously into this recovering world were small, warm-blooded, and mostly omnivorous.
their teeth tell the story of adaptability, with forms for grinding plants, cutting flesh, or cracking insect shells.
Their diets shifted with the availability of food, which was crucial when stability was rare.
These mammals bred quickly, with litters that matured fast. Short lifespans and high reproduction allowed them to respond to change.
The night was still their ally. Even after the great predators were gone, the daytime remained risky.
Many mammals preferred to stay hidden during daylight, emerging at dusk to forage.
This continued the long habit of nocturnality that had helped their ancestors survive the reign of the dinosaurs.
Their eyes, attuned to low light, and their sensitive whiskers and ears gave them an advantage in the darkness.
The world after the fire was dim, and the mammals were ready for it.
Slowly, as vegetation returned, so did diversity. Insects adapted rapidly.
With insects came their predators. Mammals that could catch and eat them prospered, finding a reliable food source.
The first ecosystems to stabilize were probably those near water, where plants grew quickly and offered shelter.
But mammals lurked at the edges, hunting along the muddy banks. In these quiet places, evolution's next chapter began.
The Earth warmed again after its brief winter. Over the next few million years, the climate shifted toward a greenhouse phase.
Rainfall increased, forests spread, and with warmth came abundance. The Paleocene epoch had begun. In this reborn environment, mammals multiplied rapidly. By this time, the survivors had already begun to diversify.
Some species developed longer limbs for running, others sharper claws for climbing. Teeth evolved for new diets.
Brain size gradually increased, especially in species that relied on sight and hearing rather than sheer instinct.
The mammals that had once been simple scavengers were now exploring every available niche. Evolution was no longer crawling, it was sprinting.
The continents were already recognizable, but not yet in their modern positions.
These changes didn't just move land, they moved life. Forests migrated with the climate, and animals followed the food sources.
Populations became isolated by new rivers or mountains, setting the stage for new species to evolve independently. In North America, mammals like Purgatorius grazed among ferns. In Europe, insectivores scoured the underbrush. Each continent hosted its own quiet experiment in adaptation, a unique story of survival unfolding across the globe. The world after the fire was one of contrasts. There were stretches of land still barren, and regions that bloomed uncontrollably. Life in this era had to be adaptable. Mammals evolved to regulate their body heat efficiently, using fur as insulation and glands for cooling. Evolution doesn't plan ahead. It tries, fails, and tries again. Some mammals developed odd forms that would later vanish from the record.
For several million years, mammals remained small, rarely larger than a cat. But the absence of large...
Gradually, evolution filled them. Herbivores grew bulkier to digest tough plants. Carnivores became faster and more coordinated. These new adaptations took time, tens of millions of years. But the process began here, in the world that had risen from the fire. Meanwhile, in the oceans, life was recovering as well. Marine reptiles were gone, but mammals would one day return to replace them. The ancestors of whales and dolphins were still land animals then, small hoofed creatures that preferred wetlands and riverbanks.
Birds, descendants of small surviving dinosaurs, took to the skies and diversified rapidly.
The planet that had once been ruled by reptiles now had a new rhythm. Mammals on the ground, birds in the... Even as life expanded, traces of the disaster never fully disappeared.
The ecosystems that emerged were fragile. Volcanic eruptions, shifting climates, and meteor strikes continued to challenge life.
But the mammals endured. Each challenge honed their adaptability.
As forests thickened, some mammals began to specialize in climbing. Their limbs rotated more freely, their claws adapted for grasping.
The first primate-like animals emerged from this arboreal world, small, elate, and social.
The land that had been burned to ash was now alive with movement again. Rain fell on green.
The world was no longer ruled by fear, but by adaptation. From devastation emerged abundance.
The age that followed was dim and delicate, a time when shadows stretched longer than sunlight, and life moved carefully beneath them. The mammals that had survived were creatures of the dark, adapted to stillness and silence. They had outlasted the worst by burrowing deep.
Imagine standing in a forest not long after the first plants had returned. The ground is soft with new...
Somewhere beneath the roots, in hidden burrows and tangled tunnels, a family of red foxes are stirring.
In this shadowed earth, survival belongs to those who can live unseen. Most mammals at this time,
they could navigate the darkness with a kind of quiet precision, guided by smell, touch, and sound, rather than sight.
Whiskers, once a minor feature, became vital tools, mapping their surroundings in constant motion.
in the absence of size and strength, awareness became survival.
They lived close to the ground, feeding on beetles, worms, and seeds. Their diets were simple but sufficient. Omnivory became the key.
Their fur provided warmth through the chill nights. For the first time, small, warm-blooded animals.
The darkness that had once been their refuge now became their domain. With most reptiles gone, mammals found the night free of competition.
In evolutionary terms, this was an explosion not measured in sudden leaps, but in steady persistence.
Among these survivors were the ancestors of many modern lineages. Some were tiny insectivores, similar to today's shrews.
Others resembled early marsupials, carrying their helpless young in pouches as they foraged.
A few small herbivores experimented with grazing on tender shoots, beginning the long lineage that would one day give rise to grazing mammals.
In the fossil record, their names appear as whispers. Similesta, Purgatorius, small bones that tell of a world.
The environment itself was a blend of old and new. Much of the earth was covered in humid forests, though patches of open land existed. Temperatures were generally warm, but nights could be cool and damp, perfect for the small mammals who preferred to venture out after sunset. In these damp forests, the mammals' greatest strength was not their size, but their ability to keep their internal world stable.
Reptiles and amphibians, still dependent on the warmth of the air, struggled in the cooler nights. Mammals didn't wait for the sun.
They created their own heat, carried their own weather inside them. It was a quiet revolution in biology. The night also shaped their minds. With limited visibility, their behavior became guided by sound, scent, and memory.
They developed routines, returning to the same feeding grounds, following familiar paths through the undergrowth.
Communication evolved gradually. Soft chirps, squeaks, and scents marking territory or signaling danger. Predators did exist. Some early birds of prey hunted at dawn. Snakes had survived too, their patience unmatched.
These dangers kept mammals cautious and clever. Every sound was a signal to freeze.
Their brains began to prioritize quick decisions, memory, and learning, traits that would later define the intelligence of their descendants. The life of a small mammal in that age was brief but eventful. They matured quickly, bred often, and died young. Evolution moved fast through these short generations, experimenting relentlessly. A slight change could decide which lineage thrived. Some became adept climbers, gripping bark with flexible digits. Others evolved digging claws. A few developed the beginnings of gliding membranes. While most of the Earth remained warm, the climate was not uniform. Volcanic activity still shaped regions. Each disturbance created new ecological opportunities. When trees fell and sunlight reached the ground,
Nature was constantly resetting and rebalancing, and mammals learned to move with it rather than against it.
Their reproduction was another quiet advantage. Unlike reptiles that laid many eggs and left them, most mammals invested heavily in fewer offspring.
The development of milk provided a reliable food source for the young, ensuring better survival rates even when external conditions changed.
In evolutionary terms, care became power. The fossils from this era are small and often fragmentary, yet they reveal remarkable detail. Inner ear bones, delicate structures, show an increasing refinement of hearing, suggesting an adaptation to nocturnal life. Each fossil is a clue, and together they paint a picture of a world where sight was secondary, but sound and scent ruled.
This was also a time when ecosystems began forming new connections. Fungi thrived in the decaying plant matter, recycling nutrients.
Insects fed on the fungi, and mammals fed on the insects. With each link restored, the web of life grew stronger. Some of the earliest mammalian predators appeared during this time as well. They were small but efficient, using stealth rather than strength.
Their teeth evolved into specialized forms: incisors for gripping, canines for piercing, molars for shearing.
The night became a silent battlefield of movement and counter-movement, of soft sounds and sudden stillness. Meanwhile, the plant world was undergoing its own revolution. Flowering plants diversified rapidly, spreading through wind and animal pollination. Seeds began to evolve structures that encouraged dispersal through animal digestion, creating partnerships that would last millions of years.
Mammals became gardeners of the planet without knowing it, carrying seeds in their fur and droppings to new lands.
As forests expanded, new microclimates appeared. Dense canopies created shade and humidity. Arboreal life encouraged new adaptations, better balance, flexible limbs, and keen spatial awareness. The planet had entered a long twilight between catastrophe and abundance. Evolution doesn't rush, it adjusts.
The long night that had once protected them would eventually give way to daylight. But for now, the shadows were enough.
The rise from the burrows began quiescent, quietly, as most great changes in nature do. The world had warmed again. The forest had thickened, and the sun no longer burned with harshness.
It was no longer a world of survival alone, but a world that invited curiosity. And curiosity is the first step toward expansion.
The mammals that had spent millions of years beneath the ground or in the shelter of night began to explore the surface more boldly. Over time, their eyes adapted, their senses broadened, and their behaviors shifted.
The forests had grown dense again, lush and tangled. Ferns spread like carpets, and fungs. Small herbivores, like a curious agouti, began to forage in the open. Their diets expanded to
Carnivorous mammals followed closely behind. Some were opportunistic scavengers. Others, the relationship between hunter and prey was reawakening, each shaping the other in a slow, endless cycle.
But the story wasn't only about competition. It was also about exploration. Forest canopies offered
Life in the trees demanded intelligence. Navigating branches required coordination, memory, and the ability to judge distances.
This encouraged the growth of larger, more capable brains. The rise from burrows was not just physical, it was mental.
The Paleocene epoch was giving way to the Eocene, a time of warmth and abundance.
Even the poles were covered in green, with subtropical vegetation thriving where today there is ice.
This expansion of forests created corridors of life across continents. Mammals spread through these corridors.
The burrows were no longer enough to contain them. The planet itself had become their home.
Within a few million years, the variety of mammals had multiplied dramatically. Early primates, early hoofed animals, and even
Each lineage was an answer to a different question posed by the changing world.
The open exploration of the surface also brought new challenges. Exposure to predators meant that vigilance became essential. Mammals developed acute senses not just for finding food, but for detecting danger. Every sense became a survival tool.
The climate's warmth supported diversity, but it also tested resilience.
Reproduction also adapted. Mammals began to build nests or dens above ground. The bonds formed through this cooperation strengthened group structures, giving rise to the complex social behaviors seen in many mammals today.
The physical landscape of the Earth was also transforming. Continents drifted farther apart than rose.
These geological forces created isolated environments where populations evolved independently, resulting in a patchwork of ecosystems. In the northern forests, small primate-like mammals thrived, their grasping hands and stereoscopic vision perfect for navigating branches.
In open regions, herbivores developed stronger limbs and faster running speeds. In the wetter land, the rise from burrows was also the beginning of mammals reclaiming the day. Some species dared to embrace daylight.
The sunlight that had once been dangerous became an ally. It offered warmth for thermoregulation and vision for exploration. The sharp hearing and keen sense of smell developed in the dark remained, giving even daytime species extraordinary awareness.
the Eocene world was teeming by now. From small tree-dwelling primates to fast-running herbivores and carnivores,
the oceans too were changing, with some land mammals beginning their gradual transition into fully aquatic life.
The rise from burrows had extended not just upward into the trees, but outward into the oceans. Fossils from this period show that mammals were growing larger. For the first time since the extinction, body size increased significantly.
Some herbivores reached the size of modern sheep or small deer. Carnivores followed suit, evolving stronger jaws and limbs.
And yet, for all their progress, the memory of the burrows lingered.
It's humbling to think that every mammal alive today carries traces of that ancient transition, a balance between safety and exploration.
As the Eocene continued, mammals became the undisputed architects of ecosystems. Driven not by size or herbivores reached the size of modern sheep or small deer. Carnivores followed suit, evolving stronger jaws and limbs.
And yet, for all their progress, the memory of the burrows lingered.
It's humbling to think that every mammal alive today carries traces of that ancient transition, a balance between safety and exploration.
As the Eocene continued, mammals became the undisputed architects of ecosystems, driven not by size or...
The world that unfolded after the mammals climbed from their burrows was still haunted by ghosts of giants.
The great reptiles were gone, but their legacy lingered in the empty spaces and the silence left behind by their extinction. Even millions of years after the impact, the Earth bore its scars. In some regions, layers of ash still rested beneath new soil. Mountain chains had risen higher, and weather patterns were shifting towards stability. The air was warmer, the rain heavier. Within that motion, mammals continued their quiet expansion. They were still small, but in evolutionary terms, smallness had become an advantage.
While the dinosaurs had relied on size and specialization, mammals thrived through adaptability. Yet even as these small mammals prospered, the last remnants of the giant age were still fading.
For the first time since the catastrophe, the balance of ecosystems stabilized. Food webs were formed, complex and interdependent.
In this period, mammals diversified at a rate unmatched in previous ages. New species appeared every few 100,000 years.
The earliest primates were leaping through trees, their hands already capable of grasping. Hoofed mammals were beginning to experiment with speed.
The Earth was alive with possibilities, and yet it was not peaceful. The forests were dense but full of competition.
Unlike the age of dinosaurs, this was an age of shared existence. Countless small creatures lived side by side.
The climate played a guiding hand. Global temperatures reached their highest point, and the poles were free of ice. In this greenhouse world, plants and animals adapted to warmth and humidity. The diversity of mammals reflected this richness.
Still, the age of giants wasn't entirely over. Other enormous creatures merge in their absence.
Herbivores such as early proboscideans, the distant ancestors of elephants, appeared in Africa and Asia.
In South America, relatives of modern sloths and armadillos began to grow in size. In this world of contrasts, size no longer dictated success. A small mammal could be as ecologically important as a large one.
The very structure of ecosystems became more complex, more layered. Every level of the food web intertwined with the next. It was also a world of sound. The forests were alive with chirps, calls, rustles, and hums from countless creatures. Communication evolved rapidly. The development of vocal cords and complex auditory systems allowed...
The Earth's surface was dynamic, but its deeper layers were shifting too. Continental drift slowed, the Atlantic widened. India's collision with Asia began lifting the Himalayas, altering wind and rainfall patterns.
Among the smaller species that thrived in this new world were early rodents, whose efficient teeth and quick reproduction allowed them to adapt almost anywhere.
Alongside them, bats made their evolutionary debut, mastering the skies at night with wings formed from stretched skin. They became the first mammals to conquer flight, using echolocation to navigate and hunt in darkness.
The mammals that evolved in this era were not just survivors. They were architects of the new world.
The Earth was learning to breathe again through its creatures.
Yet, even as life flourished, the memory of extinction remained imprinted in the natural order. Evolution is cautious after catastrophe. The small dreams of this age were not the grand visions of titans, but the quiet ambitions of persistence.
The rise of mammals was never just a story of survival. It was a story of invention, one that began deep inside them. It was the ability to carry their own heat, to build a fire within their bodies that would never go out.
Warm-bloodedness, or endothermia, seems simple now, but for the early mammals, it was an evolutionary revolution.
It meant independence from the environment. They could hunt while others slept, search for food while the ground was damp and cold. The origin of this ability is hidden, but ancient therapsids, so-called mammal-like reptiles, showed early signs of it. Inside every mammal, this engine works in remarkable balance. Heat is created through metabolism as food is broken down into energy. To stay warm, mammals must eat more and live more actively. It's a costly trade-off, but one that pays in freedom.
That freedom shaped everything. Mammals could colonize colder regions, move into higher altitudes, and explore new climates.
But the invention of warmth was more than physiology. It changed behavior, rhythm, and even the pace of life itself. Warmth also shaped emotion. The close contact between mothers and offspring, the instinct to seek touch, built the foundation for social bonds.
The internal fire became not only an engine of metabolism, but a metaphor for care itself.
The fossil evidence reflects this revolution. A secondary palate allowed mammals to breathe while chewing, ensuring a constant supply of oxygen.
In the thick forests of the early Eocene, this warmth created a world of endless motion, as small mammals.
At the same time, warmth demanded rest. The cycles of sleep became an integral part of mammalian life.
Some lineages took this adaptation further. Bats learned to manage their energy by entering Others, like early primates, developed social behaviors, huddling for comfort and grooming to maintain fur insulation. This internal order reflected a deeper principle: survival through harmony rather than reaction. The development of fur became essential. It was not merely a covering, it was technology, a living insulation that trapped air close to the skin. Another quiet revolution was unfolding within their hearts. A four-chambered heart ensured oxygenated blood reached every organ with precision.
Their perception of the world was vivid, multidimensional, and constant. Unlike reptiles that relied on bursts.
In social species, this continuity fostered emotion. The same chemistry that managed temperature. As the Eocene progressed, mammals used this energy to expand into roles that had never existed before, supported by the same internal mechanism.
It is possible to imagine an early mammal in the chill of dawn.
The world that warmth created was not silent. Life began to listen more closely. To survive here, what had begun as a biological necessity became something deeper, a symphony of senses that shaped the mammalian way of being. A rustle in the leaves might mean a predator near. The faintest shift in wind could carry the scent of food or danger.
Hearing, smell, touch, sight, and taste didn't evolve separately. They evolved together, forming a network of perception.
Among the first to refine this system were the nocturnal species.
Within the mammalian ear lies a delicate chain of three tiny bones, the malleus, incus, and stapes.
By the time true mammals emerged, they could detect higher frequencies, subtler tones, and complex patterns of sound.
Smell was no less important. Long before vision became dominant, scent was the language of the world. Air carried stories.
Their noses were elaborate sensory systems, lined with receptors that translated invisible molecules into meaning.
The olfactory bulbs of the brain were among the largest structures in early mammals.
Touch, too, became a foundation of mammalian life. Fur was not just insulation, it was a living network of sensation. Whiskers were especially sensitive, acting as antennae that read the shape and texture of the world in complete darkness.
Taste evolved in parallel with smell, refining the ability to distinguish what was safe to eat. Bitterness warned of toxins, sweetness signaled energy.
And then there was vision. As some species ventured back into daylight, vision underwent a renaissance. Some lineages developed cones capable of perceiving multiple wavelengths, allowing the first glimpses of the colorful world that flowers were creating. Depth perception improved as eyes shifted toward the front of the head, giving predators and climbers alike the ability to judge distance with accuracy.
With it came the beginnings of curiosity.
the ability to look, interpret, and wonder.
All these senses worked together, feeding into the growing complexity of the mammalian brain.
This capacity for sensory memory meant that mammals could learn from experience. A certain sound could recall danger.
Behavior became guided by memory as much as by instinct. The forest itself became a sensory landscape, layered with signals. Communication deepened. Vocalizations became increasingly complex. Simple alarm calls evolved into varied tones indicating different threats.
The same was true for scent communication. Glands produced chemicals for marking territory and signaling reproductive readiness.
This sensory sophistication was not just functional. It shaped emotion and intelligence. The brain grew more capable of making connections.
Over time, these abilities gave rise to something extraordinary, the sense of self, the first steps toward consciousness.
The world had learned to perceive itself through them, and the music of that realization would play on.
The warmth that pulsed inside every mammal was only half the story. The other half was wrapped around. Wondrous, informative. Beneath that skin lay a hidden power, network of glands.
When the first mammals appeared, their skin was already more complex than that of their reptilian ancestors, layered and alive with function.
The development of fur was the visible expression of warmth. But fur did more than conserve heat. It gave texture to sensation. Over millions of years, fur diversified. Thick and oily for cold water, soft and dense for insulation, sparse and short for heat dissipation.
In the humid forests of the Eocene, fur took on new roles. For many species, it became camouflage. But fur was only one part. Within the skin, evolution had woven a network of glands.
Sweat glands were among the most important, allowing mammals to release heat through evaporation, a feature unheard of in reptiles.
Wondrous, profound. Then there were the mammary glands, the most transformative of all.
Fat, protein, sugar, and immune molecules combined in perfect proportion, creating the most advanced biological food source on the planet. The invention of milk was a revolution in reproduction. It allowed learning, protection, and bonding. The act of feeding became the center of connection, linking generations not just through genetics, but through emotion. The hidden power of soft skin also granted adaptability. A reptile's armor offered defense, but it was rigid and slow to heal.
Pigmentation became another form of adaptation. Melanin not only determined pattern, but protected against sunlight.
The nerve endings embedded within the skin also brought a new dimension to experience, linking emotion to sensation. To touch and to be touched became an integral part of communication, as vital as sight or sound.
In aquatic mammals, the soft skin transformed yet again. The fur thinned, replaced by layers of fat, but the sensitivity remained.
The softness that protected them was paradoxically their strength. A creature with delicate skin seemed fragile, but that flexibility meant freedom.
And through that skin, through its warmth, its scent, its touch,
the world had settled into a rhythm. The mammals that once crept quietly beneath the leaves were no longer confined to their shadows.
The continents themselves were changing. The plates beneath the ocean shifted, pushing mountains upward and opening new seas.
The world that had once been uniform and tropical began to form contrasts. Wet forests, open.
For tens of millions of years, they had lived close to the ground. Now, with the climate stable and food abundant,
in the humid lands of what would one day become North America, early ungulates grazed in herds among thick ferns.
Nearby, the first large carnivorous mammals stalked through the underbrush. They were not cats or dogs, but ancient forms like creodonts.
In Asia, the forest stretched endlessly, home to small primates leaping between branches, their social lives growing more complex. Farther south, in what would become Africa, the ancestors of elephants and hippos began to appear, their bodies growing heavier. Everywhere the mammals went, they changed the world. As they grazed, they spread seeds. As they dug, they aerated the soil.
Wondrous, expansive. The oceans were transforming as well. Descendants of small...
Over time, their limbs flattened into flippers, their bodies elongated, and their nostrils shifted upward to form blowholes.
The sea, once ruled by reptiles, had new rulers now. Gentle giants who sank. South America remained isolated, a world of its own, where marsupials and early placental mammals evolved in parallel.
Australia drifted further south, carrying with it the ancestors of kangaroos, koalas, and monotremes.
The mammals didn't spread because they wanted to dominate, but because their biology allowed it. Warmth, fur, and adaptability gave them the tools. Social behavior deepened. Many mammals began to live in groups, sharing protection and resources. Cooperation became an evolutionary advantage. Some species developed migratory behavior, following food sources across great distances, connecting ecosystems that had never interacted before.
The rise of large mammals changed everything. Size brought stability. Larger animals could travel,
but it also required greater care. Parental care, already a hallmark of mammalian life, became central to survival. The mammalian brain continued to expand in size and function. The regions responsible for memory, coordination, and social interaction grew more complex.
A young animal no longer relied only on instinct. It could observe, imitate, and adapt.
The idea of tradition, actions passed on not by genes but by learning, was beginning to take shape.
As the mammals roamed, the earth responded. Plants evolved defenses against grazing. Thorns, toxins, tough fibers.
And mammals evolved ways to counter them. Some developed specialized stomachs. Others learned to select plants rich in nutrients.
The relationship between flora and fauna became one of mutual shaping, an arms race of adaptation that increased diversity on both sides.
The world had not seen such complexity since the late Cretaceous. But now, it was of a different kind.
Where once dominance had belonged to a few, it now belonged to many. Life was balanced across countless forms.
The sky above reflected this change. Birds filled the air in partnership with mammals below.
At night, when the air cooled, the sounds of jungle mammals, like howler monkeys and
They had inherited the night from their ancestors, but they had made it their own. The same fire that the world beneath the mammals' feet was never still. The slow drift of continents became the architect of everything. The Eocene had begun as a world of warmth, with tropical forests from pole to pole. But balance never lasts forever.
When Australia and Antarctica finally separated, a vast channel opened. Cold water began to surge.
The temperature of the planet began to fall. At first, the change was subtle. Seasonal patterns became more pronounced.
For the first time, survival meant adjusting not just to predators and food, but to weather itself.
The drifting continents also shaped the geography of diversity. Isolation created unique ecosystems. In South America, marsupials continued to dominate. Giant flightless birds became apex predators.
One of the most significant results of this tectonic restlessness was the creation of grasslands.
Mammals in turn adapted. Herbivores developed high-crowned teeth for grinding tough silica grass. Limbs lengthened for running. Antarctica, once forested and green, began to freeze. Ice formed at its poles for the first time in tens of millions of years. Whales, already evolved from their land-dwelling ancestors, adapted beautifully, their fat stores insulating them against the chill.
During these long transitions, evolution didn't slow, it accelerated. The constant flux of
the ability to learn and adapt quickly became more valuable than any single trait. Africa's northward drift eventually led to its connection with Eurasia. When the two landmasses met, species from each continent crossed paths.
It was a wave of competition and renewal. Those that adapted flourished, others vanished quietly.
The Earth had become a co-creation between geology and biology, an intricate feedback loop where each influenced the other. As the planet continued its motion and the climate found its long pulse of cooling and warming, the world began to breathe in a different tempo.
Wondrous, majestic. Out of this changing rhythm, evolution began a new movement.
The mammals that had once been small and cautious were now bold, immense, and powerful. The age of the megafauna had begun. In Africa, vast herds of early elephants wandered across the savannas.
Their social structures evolved in parallel. Herds were led by matriarchs whose memory guided them to hidden springs and safe valleys. Their feeding shaped the land. As they roamed, they opened the soil with their steps and spread seeds in their dung. In Eurasia, the forests thinned. Here, the megafauna were adapted for endurance in chill and snow. Mammoths appeared.
Predators followed these great herds. Saber-toothed cats prowled the edges of the plains, their massive fangs designed.
Alongside them were dire wolves, larger and heavier, built for cooperation. In South America, giant ground sloths reached sizes comparable to modern elephants.
In Australia, isolation had led evolution down unique paths. Massive kangaroos bounded across dry plains. The emergence of large mammals was not a simple matter of opportunity. It was also a matter of physics and biology.
Social behavior grew more intricate. Herds cared for their young, mourned their dead, and remembered roots over generations.
As the Pliocene and Pleistocene epochs unfolded, the Earth's climate grew increasingly variable. Glacial cycles began.
With each expansion of ice, sea levels dropped, exposing new land bridges.
When the ice retreated, seas rose again, isolating them once more. These alternating connections acted as evolutionary laboratories. Each glacial advance forced animals to migrate or adapt. Some developed thicker fur or greater fat reserves to survive the cold.
The ones that could not move or change vanished, leaving room for new forms to emerge.
By the height of the megafauna age, every continent had its titans. In North America, in Europe and Asia, woolly rhinos grazed beside mammoths and steppe horses. In South America,
the presence of these giants transformed ecosystems. Their grazing maintained open habitats, and their dung fertilized the soil. These animals were not only large, they were enduring. Many species lived for decades, passing knowledge through generations.
But beneath the balance, change was stirring again. The same cycles that had nurtured these giants would eventually test them.
The world that the giants had built was beginning to quiet. The rhythm of hooves, tusks, and massive footsteps had begun to slow. The planet had entered the late Pleistocene, and the climate was becoming erratic. Ice sheets advanced and retreated in unpredictable rhythms. The delicate balance between species, temperature, and vegetation began to wobble. The grasslands began to fragment.
And yet, even in these transformations, life persisted. Intelligence, memory, learning, and
among the changing landscapes, a new presence began to spread. Another mammal, small compared to the great beasts around it.
It could imagine, plan, and alter its surroundings intentionally. Its hands were not just for grasping, they could shape and build.
Long before their tools changed the land, these humans were part of the megafaunal world. They were observers first. The relationship between humans and megafauna began in balance. Early hunter-gatherers took only what they needed.
But over time, as populations grew and tools evolved, that balance began to shift. Hunting became more efficient.
Fire was used to shape the landscape, clearing vegetation to attract game or promote new growth.
The quiet inheritors of the future had begun to alter the natural order, not through strength, but through thought.
The combination of changing climate and human expansion proved more than many species could bear.
In regions where humans arrived later, like Australia and the Americas, the local animals had no evolutionary memory of such predators.
The result was a wave of extinctions that swept across continents, leaving behind silence where thunder once rolled. Yet the disappearance of the giants did not end the story. The world they left behind became the foundation of the one that followed.
The smaller mammals, deer, antelope, wolves, and foxes, expanded into the spaces left behind. For humans, this world of change became both challenge and opportunity. They learned to herd animals instead of only hunting them.
They learned to cultivate plants instead of merely gathering them. The first seeds of agriculture were planted in soil.
The story of the mammals did not end. It simply changed focus.
All around the world, animals adjusted. Wolves followed human settlements, eventually forming partnerships.
The world had not forgotten the giants. Their disappearance was a transformation into memory.
If one listens closely, even now, to the wind moving through the trees, to the heartbeat beneath the rib,
the warmth that once protected a small creature in the night, the senses that guided it through danger, all remain within us.
The quiet inheritors of the future are not just those who walk upright, but every being that carries this ancient flame. The story of mammals is still unfolding, one generation at a time, in the wondrous final. And as the earth turns, the descendants of those quiet survivors